listening to the Reformand Initiative podcast, where we analyze and discuss Roman Catholic theology and practice from an evangelical perspective. My name is Clay Kennard, and I'm joined here in the city center of Rome, Italy, with my brothers and colleagues, Dr. Leonardo De Chirico and PhD candidate Reed Carr. Gentlemen, how are you doing this morning?
Very well, thank you.
Good. I'm not sure if we've mentioned that in the past, but for our listeners, Reed is working on a PhD. And Reed, just briefly before we jump into our episode, what is your thesis?
Well, I wasn't prepared to respond to that question, but yeah, basically looking at a certain aspect of Roman Catholicism from an evangelical perspective, specifically looking at how Roman Catholicism uses the word in terms of evangelize and evangelization in their documents and their teachings, and helping evangelicals to understand what exactly they are referring to, and then what the implications are for the church's missiology, basically.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure we'll be talking about that more and more as you continue your research, and we pray that that will go well and be a wonderful encouragement and resource for the church. The reason I brought that up was just so that our listeners understand that this is a place where we are constantly studying and researching and evaluating modern day Roman Catholicism. And there's no better proof of that really than the Vatican Files, vaticanfiles.org, which is the blog that Dr. Leonardo De Chirico began many years ago, in which he contributes to monthly. We have episodes on this podcast always talking about his articles.
Has it always been a once a month contribution?
No.
Before it was more often? Or?
Yeah, more often at the beginning, then it slowed a little bit, but a monthly article.
Yeah. Well, it's a wealth of resources. And so, Reed, we're going to discuss that Vatican file today, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's Leonardo's latest article, which is called "Who is Afraid of Liquid Roman Catholicism?" And it's a really, really interesting discussion, actually. And it's based on an article in the First Things, which is a Catholic online resource. And it was an article that the American Catholic George Weigel wrote. It's called "Liquid Catholicism and the German Synodal Path." Which that too was an interesting article, and then it was even more interesting once Leo gave a kind of a different reading of it from an evangelical perspective. But in his article, Weigel talks about how back in 2002, so 20 years ago now, he started referring to a light Catholicism, light spelled L-I-T-E, and he said that he quickly realized that term did not translate well and was not understood. In fact, whenever I read the first lines of the article, I wasn't exactly sure what was being referenced by light Catholicism. But the play on words was the kind of reference to like Coca-Cola Light. So like a light version of Coca-Cola. Then he said he dabbled with Catholicism Zero or something like that, Catholic Light leads to Catholic Zero, like Coca-Cola Light, then eventually ended up with Coca-Cola Zero. And he realized that too was a disaster as far as how it was translated and understood by other people. But and then he began referring to liquid Catholicism. But the idea, and quoting from his article, in fact, the first lines, he says, "I began using the term Catholic light to describe a project that detached the church, of course, the Catholic Church, from its foundations in Scripture and tradition. It was a Catholicism that could not tell you with certainty what it believes or what makes for righteous living. A church of open borders, unwilling or unable or unwilling to define those ideas and actions by which full communion with the mystical body of Christ is broken." So it was a way of him who, Weigel would be considered a conservative Catholic. And it was a way for him to express his frustrations with what he had been seeing happening in the Catholic Church as a light Catholicism, just open borders, which then became liquid Catholicism. And Leo, in the opening of his article, talks about exactly what is meant by this term liquid. It was coined by a German sociologist, correct, Leo?
Polish.
Zygmunt Bauman.
Yeah.
And he used the term liquid to refer to modernity, liquid modernity. But liquid has been used to refer to about everything since, right? Finances are liquid.
Love is liquid.
Love is liquid. Liquid family.
Unstable.
Yeah. And what does liquid mean? What is it?
Yeah, it's a feature of modern life. Everything is moving, unstable, restless. Always on the move and never committed to something solid, as opposed to solidity, as opposed to grounded, stable, long term. Everything is in a state of flux.
And Weigel, when he speaks of liquid Catholicism, obviously he means that in a negative sense.
Yes, very negative.
And so why is it negative for him, and what kind of Catholicism would he like to see?
Because he has in mind a picture of Catholicism that is, on the contrary, stable, doctrinaire, institutional, hierarchical, well-defined, harmonized, clear-cut. And so that liquidity brings about a sense of uncertainty, a sense of ambiguity, a sense of confusion, a sense of moving on, not knowing where the whole thing is going. So it is a cultural reaction, even emotional reaction against the Catholicity of the Catholic Church. The fact that the Church is at the same time solid and liquid, if we want to use these metaphors, and not accepting the outcomes and the consequences of the last 100 years of Catholicism, not grappling with them and sticking to a picture of Catholicism that is very much characterized and defined by solidity instead of liquidity.
So I'm sure he was a big fan of Ratzinger, more of a fan of Ratzinger than Pope Francis.
Yes. And even John Paul II. Weigel is a biographer of John Paul II. And in him he saw this restatement of the centrality of the Catholic institution, Catholic dogma, Catholic sacraments, Catholic mission. And of course, he is, let's put it this way, he's not a great fan of Pope Francis, whom he sees as the representative of this liquidity, and the way he implements his papacy and the way he leads the church is characterized by this liquid type of Catholicism, instead of being marked by the reaffirmation of the historical, well-defined, traditional, already argued for type of Catholicism.
It's as if there's a spectrum presented here, one end of the spectrum being the very solid aspect of Roman Catholicism, which Weigel would promote for or be a proponent of. On the very other far end would be the most liquid aspect of Roman Catholicism, which the other part of the title of his article is Liquid Catholicism and the German Synodal Path.
Oh, yeah.
So what's the significance of the German Synodal Path, and why is it a threat to Weigel?
Well, he sees Pope Francis being embodying this kind of liquidity, and at the top level, highest level possible. Right. So that is scaring for a Roman Catholic like Weigel. But then he sees a further threat and a further indication of this liquid Catholicism in what has been happening in Germany over the last 5-6 years with this synodal path. This council made of lay people and clergy, cardinals, bishops, representing the whole spectrum of German Catholicism, discussing the future of the Church and suggesting some measures and provisions which are very different from the traditional understanding of Catholicism, suggesting, for example, the possibility of blessing same-sex relationships, admitting to the sacraments people in all kinds of loving relationships, no longer defined by gender or by numbers. And
the option of celibacy, if that's part of their agenda.
Yeah, even the opening to married priesthood, the opening gradual, not as radical as women's priesthood, but the opening up of a process, of course, leading to eventually women being recognized as priests, and the affirmation of the prominence of the national church over the universal church. So all these proposals, which are beginning to take shape in this synodal path, are really scaring for readers like George Weigel, and for some sectors of the Catholic Church, not only Weigel, but he represents a sector of the Church, seeing what is happening in Germany, supported by most bishops. So it's not a fringe thing. It's not something that comes out of a little group of grumblers. It's mainstream German Catholicism, which happens to be the most affluent and contributing region of the Catholic Church, and yet moving towards directions that are very different from the solid understanding of Catholicism, stable, that Weigel wants his church to be.
So how does the Catholic Church balance these two spectrums?
Now, talking about the synodal path, they are in the process of voting all these measures.
Okay.
They have vast majorities, so there is no question whether these proposals will become items voted in, and then the issue is what the Vatican is going to do with them, because the Pope can say, okay, game is over, it was fun, but go back to your classroom, back to business.
Right.
And you played too much. It's time to come back. But the Germans are not going to submit to it. They've already said that this is what they want to do, in spite of top-down decision. So it's a critical issue that is going, and the Pope is postponing his reaction to it, and perhaps hoping that the next Pope will have to deal with it.
So why is it this region, it seems like, creates these potential issues that would split the Roman Catholic Church?
Well, the German, it's intriguing from an external, for an external observer to see that the country that gave the last German Pope, and a conservative Pope like Ratzinger, who before becoming Pope had been the prefect for the Congregation for Sacred Doctrine, the defender of the Catholic traditional faith. And after Ratzinger, that the same place, the same job has been was given to another German traditional Catholic theologian, Gerhard Müller, who was dismissed by Francis. Yeah. But a top position by a German cardinal, and yet the country, the Catholic German Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, moved and is moving in a very, very different direction, supported by the majority of bishops and cardinals.
Okay, more progressive.
Yeah, very progressive. There are, historical issues about the Germany being, the place where Catholics and Protestants are half and half. There's been a huge, impactful secularization taking place in Germany. Losses of members, and it seems that the German Catholics are looking at the direction of the Protestant liberal churches. They want to follow that direction, conceding. They want to adapt. They want to compromise. They want to find ways to include, and perhaps not realizing that this decision, this trend, which has been applied by liberal Protestant churches, have not caused any change, but rather...
Or significant growth.
But rather continuing and even increasing
decline
and crisis.
Weigel says in his article that liquid Catholicism is a content-light church that takes its cues from the surrounding culture and imagines itself primarily in the business of doing good works and the world's understanding of good works. So how does Pope Francis, who is a liquid pope, this describes him. You read his writings and listen to what he talks about. It's doing good works and the social aspect of the terminology. How does he, or maybe he, as you said, tries to delay and make it a problem for the next pope. But how does he try to maintain this balance of being a liquid pope, but understanding that he has to maintain some type of solidity?
Yeah, that's a challenge, of course. And Weigel argues that Pope Francis is not actually properly doing this balancing. He's pushing the pedal of liquidity and so in so doing, pushing the church towards becoming an even more liquid church. So what Weigel actually doesn't fully realize or doesn't want to realize is that it's not the liquidity, if we want to use this metaphor, is not something of an invention by Pope Francis or the German synodal path or some progressive exponents of modern-day Catholicism. It has been the direction taken by the Catholic Church at the highest level at the Second Vatican Council. This is exactly the outcome of Vatican II. And Pope Francis is applying it, is embodying it, is actually making it real and expanding it, but not inventing it. So it's quite curious for an intellectual like George Weigel not to realize that the issue is not Pope Francis or today's German Catholicism. The origin and the impulse towards liquid Catholicism go back to Vatican II. Mm-hmm. So that's the outworking of Vatican II. The idea the idea of this mystical understanding of the church whereby everybody is included in different ways, in mysterious ways. That's liquidity. There is a sense in which Catholics are still defined as being part of the Catholic Church juridically, but then there is this other liquid way of belonging to the Church that is not defined and yet real. And we could multiply examples. The relationship with other religions. The solid Catholicism would say either you are Catholic or you are not. But the liquid Catholicism of Vatican II says there are different ways of being Catholics. So there are different lengths, there are different relationships. And with Muslims, we worship the same God. With Jews, we have the same covenants. The same old covenant, first covenant. With people of other religions, we have the same religious mindset, and so on and so on. So that there are degrees, no longer either or. There are shades of, instead of being clearly defined, who is a Catholic, who is a Roman Catholic.
Your comments raise an interesting point, and this idea that the issue is not so much the liquidity of Pope Francis or the German synodal path. That's all tied into Vatican II.
Yeah.
But Weigel makes a comment in his article saying, I know of no instance in which the Catholic-like project, the liquid Catholicism, has led to a vibrant Catholicism doing the work that Pope St. John the 23rd, who convened the Vatican Council, and the Second Vatican Council set before the Church, the conversion and sanctification of the world. So there's two different readings of Vatican II, and that's part of the problem is that was also present at the Vatican itself, and people have observed and written about it, that there were these competing views between progressive Catholicism and more conservative Roman Catholics who were trying to push their agendas, and there was, in the end, no ground given, so the language was used that could be interpreted one way or the other.
Yeah. So
he's committed. He has to be committed to Vatican II.
Yeah.
But the implications are what you're seeing in liquid Catholicism. So it's this interesting dance, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a cancer that ultimately goes back to the Council of Trent, the rejection of sola scriptura. Liquid Catholicism wouldn't exist apart from that. Right? And a rejection of the inerrancy of Scripture, and at least is the way we understand it.
Yeah, there is the point you made, Rita, I think is very important, because it is clearer from an external observation point what is taking place in Roman Catholicism. Weigel, with all its erudition and knowledge, he doesn't really see that the issue is in Vatican II, and even more deeply in the very fabric of Roman Catholicism, which is at the same time solid and liquid, and it is grounded on a tension between its solid aspects and its liquid aspects. And he wants to focus on the solid aspects of Catholicism, the catechism, the dogmas, the institutions, the morals. And but Catholicism is also evolving, changing, embracing, including, expanding, morphing. And it is both. It is not either or, it is both. And that's the genius of Catholic. With Vatican II, there has been a season that we're living in that has promoted the liquidity of Catholicism, but not relinquishing the solidity of it. The emphasis is now shifted on the liquid aspects of Catholicism. But the solid aspects are still there. The Pope is there. The Vatican is there. The Vatican Bank is there. The Catechism is there. All the Vatican departments are there. The top-down hierarchical structure is there. Everything of the solid Catholicism is still in place.
Roman.
It is Roman. It is Roman-centered. It is Roman-focused. What has been given emphasis since Vatican II has been the liquid, the Catholic, the Catholicity project, and without so creating a new balance between the two aspects, and so he fears that this liquid aspect of Catholicism will eventually dissolve the whole thing. But in a way, the genius of Catholicism has always been to maintain a kind of a tension between the two. Now, emphasizing the liquid, for many years and centuries, emphasizing the solid aspects of Catholicism. Now we're living in a season of 80 years, 70, 80 years, that is giving emphasis on the liquid aspects of Catholicism, but not relinquishing the other ones, but putting them at creating a new balance.
I think it's important thinking about this from an evangelical perspective. Well, one, to bring some, you already answered and Clay hinted at it, but obviously many times on this podcast and in our writings, Leo, you specifically refer to the Roman and the Catholic aspects of Roman Catholicism. And that could be, Roman is substituted by the solidity, and the liquidity or is substituted by the Catholic aspect of Roman Catholicism. But again, thinking about this from an evangelical perspective, I think the tendency is to think of Roman Catholicism or solid Catholicism as good Catholicism. Whereas the modern expression of Catholicism, or the liquid, or the Catholic aspect of Catholicism that we see in Pope Francis and the Synodal Project for sure, is bad Catholicism. So let's focus on the good, and let's recover the good aspects of it. In fact, Weigel concludes his article this way. He says, liquid Catholicism reigns supreme in the deliberations of the German Synodal path. The bad aspects, that's my words. The result will not be evangelical renewal, but a further abandonment of the gospel. Now that's very intentional language, I think. I mean, he's writing in an American Catholic, in American context, with a lot of evangelical readers. A lot of evangelical readers not only read, but contribute to Catholic, our first things. But so we have to understand what exactly is meant by that. And he helps us in his own words. I mean, Weigel is the one who wrote the book Evangelical Catholic. And a reading of that book helps you understand that what he's meaning by evangelical renewal is a return to the more traditional aspects of Roman Catholicism, but that are anchored in the sacramental system. So it's not like a form of evangelical Christianity.
Not at all.
It's just the traditional Christianity.
Evangelical zeal, evangelical passion, emotional involvement, but grounded on Catholic doctrine and Roman Catholic dogma. That's what he means by evangelical Catholicism. He uses the word evangelical, but he redefines it in terms of it being a qualifier of a attitude with no contents, no doctrinal content. The doctrine is brought about by the Catholic Church. Evangelicals contribute with the kind of passion and commitment. That's the way he understands it. So when he says evangelical renewal, he means
return to more traditional form.
Traditional Catholicism lived with passion, lived out with zeal.
It's not the Reformation understanding of an evangelical renewal.
Not at all. Not at all.
And in fact,
it's a good practicing Catholic. It's a faithful. It's a move away from nominal Catholicism to a more sincere expression of the faith, but completely rooted in the sacramental system.
So the paradox in our evangelical world is that when a North American evangelical conservative reader reads Weigel, he may understand that he is talking about this difference between conservative Christianity and progressive Christianity. He's talking about Roman Catholicism. He's not talking about conservative Christianity. He's not talking about conservative Protestant Christianity. He's talking about Rome, from a conservative point of view. And so if you read the present day situation from, say, the perspective of from the evangelical global South, Pope Francis looks very promising because he talks about relationships. He talks about personal encounter with Jesus. He talks about the gospel. He talks about mission. So the global South prefers the liquid type of Catholicism. The American conservative side prefers the solid types of Catholicism, but it's Catholicism. Both of them are two faces of the same reality, and we have to understand that there is a tension between the Roman and the Catholic together, forming what we call Roman Catholicism. So we should not be over surprised by moves in one direction or the other. They are part of the inner tension of Catholicism. And both solid and liquid aspects of Catholicism, the combination of the two, they do form the heart of Catholicism. And we have to understand these dynamics and to understand that we're not talking about a move towards a reformation of Rome.
Yeah.
In neither the conservative nor the progressive, neither the solid nor the liquid. We're talking about ways of reaffirming the reality of Roman Catholicism with all its commitments to unbiblical principles, all its compromises, all its deviations away from biblical Christianity.
Yeah. And as long as that reigns supreme, as it still does, there will not be an evangelical renewal in the biblical sense, but a further abandonment of the gospel.
Yeah.
So, which happened at the rejection of the Reformation.
Yeah, I think that, and just to conclude our conversation, it's an interesting way to conclude the article, a further abandonment of the gospel.
Yeah.
But that assumes that there's a biblically faithful gospel present already, and so evangelicals have to be very careful on how they understand what is being said and what is at stake. But Leo, thank you for your article. It's a very interesting discussion and absolutely essential to understanding modern day Roman Catholicism and how evangelicals have to read it in order to understand it well.
Yeah, and it makes me think of the declaration that the Reformation Initiative put together in 2016.
Yeah.
Is the Reformation over a statement of evangelical convictions? So if you want to know what we mean when we say that, what it would take for a evangelical renewal or return to the biblical gospel, go check out the statement at isthereformationover.com. Read the statement. You can sign it and you can share it with other people. So follow us on social media at Reformanda Rome on Twitter and Reformanda Initiative on Facebook, and send us your questions, your comments. We'd like to respond to those. Is there anything else, gentlemen?
Not from me.
All right. Until next time from Rome, God bless.